I think we're live. We got a couple people joining the session right now. This is great. How's everybody feeling today? Give me a thumbs up just so that we know the sound is working. Perfect. That's great. Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session today. My name is Miriam Chamberlain, and I'm one of the event hosts, and I have the absolute pleasure to introduce Caitlin MacGregor today. Caitlin is the CEO and co-founder of Plum and is passionate about equipping business leaders with the talent data they need to match their talent to the right roles. With vision, tenacity, and incomparable resilience, she has led Plum's evolution and growth from a pre-employment assessment solution to a robust talent management platform that is absolutely revolutionizing how enterprise organizations manage their talent across the employee lifecycle. We are so grateful to have you today, Caitlin. Thank you. Before I turn the mic over to Caitlin, before we get started, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to highlight some important and useful features. I'm sure everyone's well equipped right now in understanding the platform, but just to highlight a couple points. So we encourage everyone to use the chat feature to share ideas, comments, and thoughts throughout the presentation. Following the presentation, we will have a 10-minute Q&A session. We kindly ask that you post your questions that you would like addressed in the Q&A tab. And if anyone would like to join the stage for an interactive Q&A, happy to do that as well. In order to do that, you'll just have to use the raise hand function. And everyone is reminded that to be respectful, clear, and concise with the questions, and we will do our absolute best to answer all the questions that we can. If anyone is interested in tweeting or posting on social media about the conference or about the presentation, we encourage you to do so as well using hashtag SHRC21. I will ensure that I post this in the chat as well for your reference. And one final note, just to make everyone aware that this session today is being recorded. So at this time, I'd love to turn this over to Caitlin. Caitlin, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be speaking today. Hopefully you can all see my screen really well right now. This is a new platform to be using, and I'm excited to really talk about a new data set that maybe some of you are using in some form right now or aren't. And my hope is that, at the end of this session, you'll really have a new perspective of how there's an opportunity to understand your people better by leveraging industrial organizational psychology, and that it'll really be an opportunity to reveal each employee's strengths and potential and really help transform your organization. And so, as it was introduced, I'm Caitlin MacGregor. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Plum. So we're a software as a service platform. We're based out of Waterloo, and we work primarily with enterprise and growing companies to help them better understand the potential within their organization and be able to leverage that potential as they grow. And so we really started this business as a way of saying, there's this really highly predictive data on people's potential that exists, and how do we democratize access to it? And how do we put it into a platform that allows it to scale across the entire organization? I built 2 businesses for other people before starting my own, and I was really my own first customer, where I was paying for a very expensive consultant to bring industrial organizational psychology into my company. And I saw an opportunity of, how to democratize access to this data. And so I'm hoping that today really is about educating different ways of thinking about using this data, especially as times have really changed and we don't have to rely on siloed use cases, and we don't have to rely on really expensive consultants. Technology has been able to really evolve industrial organizational psychology to be much more useful across the entire life cycle of employees. And so right now, when companies make decisions around talent, be it for hiring, be it for internally, for thinking about career pathing, whatever it is, when we think about making talent decisions, often there's a plethora of solutions that focus on existing historical data that really describes where someone has been. This data is usually scraped from resumes and job descriptions, and it's about turning hard skills and experience into searchable keywords. And the problem with this historical data is it's embedded with the systemic barriers and biases that dictate access to education, internships, and career progression. They really give a rear view mirror judgment on where someone has been, but it's not a valid objective predictor of future success. Versus human potential data is really about understanding where someone can thrive if just given the opportunity. And industrial organizational psychology is the science for measuring human potential, and it focuses more on those transferable soft skills that have been proven to be 4 times more accurate at predicting on-the-job success. And when I say 4 times more accurate, what I'm talking about is that if we look at education and experience, anything below a 0.2 correlation is really like a coin toss. It really can't predict future outcomes. It can focus on qualifications, but it can't talk about future performance. And so if we were looking at actually measuring performance, what we need to do is get into what are those transferable soft skills, and we call them talents because it's so much more than this soft part. It really is the durable part, the piece that transfers with someone from one job to the next. You know, I have built 2 businesses for other people and my own, all different industries, manufacturing the first one, educational technology the second, HR tech for the last decade. You know, what is consistent from that journey that follows with me? That's really looking at people's innate talents, what makes them exceptional. And when you look at those innate talents, that is what actually predicts people's performance. And so when we look at the research, third-party research in the field of industrial organizational psychology, and we look at our own validation studies, we're consistently seeing 4 times greater prediction at being able to predict somebody's performance long-term versus education and past experience. And so the question is, if this data is 4 times more accurate, what in the world are we doing leaving it to the very end of the process? Well, a lot of the times, the reason why assessments are often used late in the process has been those barriers of it's complex to deploy, complex to understand, very expensive. And so really there's an opportunity to take the most predictive data and bring it much earlier into the decision-making process so that we're focusing on the people that have the potential first. So kind of a crude way of thinking about it, if you think about jobs that really don't change, they're very similar. So let's say somebody was a sales rep at selling phone books at company A, and now they're going to sell phone books at company B. Okay, in that case, the past experience that somebody had, that historical data, 2/3 of their ability to understand if they're going to be successful in this very similar role, okay, that historical data can be helpful because it's apples to apples. But now you get into a situation where the job is changed. So you're taking somebody that was selling phone books and now they're selling cybersecurity. Well, if the organization is different, if the culture is different, if the sales methodology, they were doing solution selling and now it's challenger sales, anything that creates a substantial change in that job, that historical data becomes less relevant, and it becomes 2/3 of the equation is about what is those transferable talents. And so, you know, when we think about it, what we're hearing from our enterprise customers is that even at the enterprise level, their jobs are changing as frequently as every 6 months. I heard this statistic 2 years ago before COVID, and I thought, they must be exaggerating. There's no way at the enterprise level jobs are changing every 6 months. Well, then COVID hit, and definitely jobs are changing every 6 months, and we're hearing it with every single one of our customers. And so in the instance where job priorities are changing and strategic goals are changing, we can see the need to rely on understanding if somebody can adapt well and succeed in a role they may never have done in the past, in type of activities that they've never done in the past. And so it really comes down to, we need to start measuring for somebody's potential, not what they've done in the past, but how well will they succeed in this new environment. And that comes down to understanding people's innate talents. And so Plum has built every part of our business around the science of industrial organizational psychology. And there are some best practices in the field that really this is about being able to identify them and bring them together. So if you were to take a first-year psychology course, you would often learn about the Big Five, or the 5-factor model. And there's an acronym, OCEAN, where it's looking at openness to new experiences, and conscientiousness, and extroversion, and agreeableness, and narcissism, or neuroticism. And so what basically that breaks down to is, we started our company focusing on the top 2 traits within each of those Big Five that really dominate in terms of being able to predict that outcome. So in conscientiousness, half of it is industriousness, which is checking off that to-do list. The other half is orderliness, which is creating the process. And collectively that makes, is somebody going to be good at executing? So we did this for years and realized that right over people's head, it was way too much. It wasn't accessible. Employees didn't, and candidates didn't feel like that data was helping them. It was just confusing them. And so we spent a lot of time figuring out how to make this accessible. Part of democratizing something is really making sure that it's useful. And so we ended up realizing that there was a better way of explaining how these innate talents really impact somebody in a practical real world environment. And so in this case, we were able to take those Big 5-factor model, and we were able to combine it with other predictors of success, which is cognitive ability. Now, the problem with cognitive ability is there's a bunch of assessments, like IQ assessments and things like that, that focus on language and math, that tend to discriminate against certain socioeconomic groups. I grew up taking French immersion, and so my vocabulary between English and French is quite vast, but in English alone, I may not pick up as many words and know the definitions as maybe somebody that just studied English the entire time. And so you can see that, that could create an adverse impact on me because it is only testing me for the one language, not multiple. The other thing with math is that the further you move away from school, from being in school, the more we tend to forget a lot of that math stuff. So then there's this bias against age that tends to come in. So there's a lot of problems with how cognitive ability has been assessed in the industry. So we focused on fluid intelligence, which is really understanding not what you've learned from language and math in the past, again, that kind of rear view mirror perspective, but how do you handle brand new situations? How do you really understand a brand new situation you've never encountered? How do you adapt and solve that problem effectively? And a lot of the times we focus the first part of this fluid intelligence on abstract problem solving. So we use a bunch of visual puzzles. But the other part that we assess for is social intelligence. Let's be honest, a lot of the roles in work aren't about an abstract problem. It's really about a people problem. Do you know the right thing to say in order to get the right response from other people? Do you understand how to read other people's emotion and respond in a way that gets the best from others? And so we do that through situational judgment questions, so work scenarios and what's the best way and worst way to respond. And so from that, we're able to take these 2 cognitive pieces, problem solving and social intelligence. We're able to take personality in a way that you can't game or fake. And it's like a recipe, put them all together, and we're able to create this universal framework of 10 talents. And the value of these 10 talents is that we can understand every single person in terms of what drives them and gives them a sense of self-worth. And on the flip side, what would they delegate to somebody else if they had the resources and time? And they would delegate to somebody else because they're not the thing that they excel in the most. And then the other part of this is that it also gives us a framework to understand the jobs and the needs of the roles and what are those behaviors that are needed for each role and how do they fit together. And so one of the things we've been really able to think about is how do you define the behaviors of a person and the role and then match them together. And so this universal framework has allowed us to really create that standard, so that the great thing about this is you only need to take the Plum assessment once. And if you stick around for the whole presentation, you'll get the link so you can complete your own Plum profile and see what your top talents are and be able to share those online like so many others do. And so moving on to, what does this all mean? When you have access to this data, how does this change how we evaluate people, how we think about people? Well, the great thing is that we all understand that job descriptions, because of how quickly things are changing, are often becoming out of date so rapidly. There's really been an evolution where job descriptions 5 years ago were there to weed people out. It was really there to screen people out. It was really there to reduce how many people you're looking at. And really, that's the wrong way to think about job descriptions. Job descriptions are an opportunity to really market how amazing the job is and how amazing the company is, and use it as kind of an open call to say, please come and apply. That's the best place for a job description, and how amazing the company is, and it doesn't matter if some of the details in the job have evolved. Really, this is just about getting as many people in the funnel as possible. Where we see the job descriptions failing is when you start using them to screen people out. It's not needed. When you want to understand if somebody is going to be successful, it's not about check mark by check mark, how many years of education, what school did they go to, what prior experience, because of everything I said before. It doesn't matter if they sold phone books or cybersecurity. That's not as much as relevant as, are they able to be successful in the behavioral needs that you require in this job? So think about how once you have somebody in a job, we often ask managers to define KPIs, key performance indicators. Well, wouldn't it be great to have those KPIs in advance? Even better is defining the KBIs, the key behavioral indicators. How do you understand which behaviors are needed for somebody to be successful moving forward? And so right now, if you were to create a behavioral competency model, you'd probably hire Korn Ferry or a similar consultant to come in, interview all the different job experts within your organization, the manager, the manager's boss, the HR business partner, maybe some top performers. And what Korn Ferry would try to do is find alignment. What are those key behaviors that predict success in that role moving forward? What are the needs of the role moving forward? And so what we've done is automated that process, that in 8 minutes, you can ask the individual stakeholders for their opinions on what behaviors are most critical for the job. And if you find that somebody is a 98 match because they have adaptation and then persuasion and then innovation, which is what's needed for this role, then you can have a high degree of confidence that that person's going to be able to deliver what you need. Sure. Understanding salaries, understanding what prior experience are they bringing to the table. All of those things are going to be important, but those can come later. First, we want to know if this person's going to be successful. Second, we want to understand how long is it going to take them to get up to speed. What are the other pieces of the puzzle, like salary expectations, that come into it? But those can come later. We want to start with, can they deliver the behaviors needed for the job first and foremost? And so that really changes once you understand, everybody's strengths and those innate talents and what drives them, and then you understand the behavioral needs of the job. What this does is it changes what you're able to do as a company. Once you have that data on your people and your roles, you can start to identify that hidden talent in your organization. You can identify and unlock that potential with your organization. Then with this data, you know what to focus on to properly personalize their development, how to enhance the things they're already amazing at, how to develop coping strategies for the areas that are very draining on them. So you have the ability to then develop them. And then last is match people to new opportunities that really accelerate their potential. I had at the very first slide, we went over very quickly, but our mission as a company really is to help people realize their full potential. And people are able to realize their potential when they're in jobs that really play to their strengths. There is something in all of us that make us exceptional compared to our peers. When you can align what makes somebody exceptional into a job that really utilizes that exceptional quality, that's how you get top performers. That's how you get people fulfilling their full potential and not wanting to go anywhere else. And then the last part of this is, okay, that's great. We want to identify, develop, and match potential, but how is potential measured right now in organizations? Well, often it's done with a 9 box with your director level and above when you start talking about succession planning. We all know that one axis is performance and one axis is potential. And it ends up being very subjective on the manager and the executives to arbitrarily place people into one of those boxes, saying if they have potential or not. And so this is the era of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is actually the managers and executives that are throwing their hands up and saying, actually, I need objective data to be able to make these decisions. I don't want to be responsible for saying who does and doesn't have potential. I need objective data. This is also because of the change of COVID, you don't have to move somebody halfway across the world for them to contribute to a new department or a new initiative. So you need this objective data to scale across the entire global organization. And that's what this new data set allows you to do. And so this is a great example of a use case of Maya, where, this is a real life use case. We've changed the name, obviously, but Maya was able to complete her Plum profile, and it was able to reveal what drives her and gives her that sense of self-worth and allows her to be exceptional compared to her peers. But it was also able to look at the opposite of drivers, which are what drains her. What if she spends too much time in those activities that drain her would eventually lead to burnout. And let's be honest, we all want to help people avoid burnout. Well, it's often about aligning what are they spending their time on. If you're spending your time on things that drain you all the time, that's going to lead to burnout. And so by completing her Plum profile, she was able to get her own talent guide, which is her professional development guide that lays out specifically what are those drivers and drainers for each talent. You can see within conflict resolution, we break it into the competencies of engaging in dialogue, finding compromises and solutions, and understanding multiple perspectives, and then the specific behaviors within each of those. So there are certain areas that really drive Maya and make her excel and give her that sense of self-worth. So at the end of the day, she's like, I nailed that. That's amazing. I want to keep doing this job because I feel great doing it, because I really feel like I'm bringing to the table what I uniquely am exceptional in. But there are certain areas that also are draining. And so those are opportunities to develop compensatory strategies, or, basically it's like your phone battery. If you're working, if you're on your phone and you're under 20%, your phone is slightly sluggish. It takes longer to accomplish things. And eventually you may have your entire battery stop and your phone powers off. But if you flip your phone into power saving mode, then you can get a little bit more juice and go a little bit farther. And that's really what coping strategies are there processes or formulas or things that you can do so it's a little less draining. But it really pinpoints on where there are opportunities to leverage those strengths even more and where there's opportunities to develop those coping strategies. Well, what's great in this scenario is that Maya had been as an underwriter in an insurance company for 6 years. She'd always been considered a top performer, but what the company didn't realize is that Maya was absolutely burnt out at the end of those 6 years. She was spending a lot of her time on things that drained her. She was looking for a new opportunity. The thing is, Maya had all this institutional knowledge. She was really passionate about the organization. She, as an underwriter, understood parts of the organization that were trying to be automated. And so, when they're thinking about trying to retain Maya, what often are the areas that people think about when retaining somebody who's been an underwriter for 6 years? Well, our system was able to say these are all the different opportunities within the organization and how well Maya would be a fit for those different opportunities. And if we dive in, most people would think, let's promote Maya to be director of underwriting. She's been in this role for 6 years, let's do it. But if you can see here that even though she's probably very capable of doing the job, there's also, a vast 37% of the population would enjoy and thrive in that job more. And that even though managing others and decision-making are strengths of Maya's, she would have to rely a lot on conflict resolution, persuasion, and communication, things that naturally drain her. So again, she might do the role, but 12 months, 18 months later, she's still burnt out and still a flight risk for the organization. Versus if we look at something probably that Maya never would have considered, let alone the person hired for this role, we can see that Maya is actually a 94% match for product management. And that's not all product management, that's product management at this exact company at this exact time based on what they're looking for. And in this case, she ranks in the top 6% of the entire workforce in terms of how likely she is to thrive at execution, innovation, adaptation. And even though teamwork and communication are going to be utilized, they're not utilized as much in the role, and that still places her in being such a strong fit. And now the great scenario with this is that Maya was actually hired to be a product manager. And that allowed for her, when she was brought through into the role, where they could really focus on how to support her in her development. This is a rule that I think we all understand as a best practice, but unfortunately isn't talked about enough. 70% of employee development happens through on-the-job activity. So now Maya is set up in a place where what she's going to be doing, she naturally thrives at. And in the areas that she needs support, yes, you got to see in the comments, 20% is that job shadowing and mentoring. And so now Maya has a common language to utilize with her peers to say where she's focusing on and what she needs to develop. And then 10% is that formal learning. That's your learning content management system. It's only 10% of the equation. And so what happened with Maya is that both her manager and herself were able to use her professional development guide to make sure that Maya was really the CEO of her own career development. She was set up for success to better manage where to utilize her strengths and where to focus on coping strategies and make sure that the role was setting her up for success. 20% really gave her that common language so that if she needed support with conflict resolution, she could talk to her manager and peers around that. And then 10% really is that roadmap. If she wanted to focus on conflict resolution, now she knows where she'll get the highest ROI when she gets into that learning content management system. And so here, this is really about empowering Maya and empowering her manager to support her fully in this role. And so we can see that this also goes into, as Maya joins the team, able to understand the strengths that are on that team. This team is incredible at execution, and they gravitate towards checking off the to-do list, putting their heads down and getting stuff done. We're also able to see if there's commonalities on the team in the opposite direction. This manager that inherited this new remote team hasn't met the people yet, doesn't have the time to really get to know them as quickly as what they would like. And they're able to see right from the beginning that this team would prefer to execute than to come together and define success and what that looks like, and really divide up the roles before getting their heads down and working on something. And so they're able to identify that the manager can support this team with teamwork, setting a good cadence of meetings to get alignment before people break off and work on their own projects. And so really this is about taking the data from where we started as an organization, hiring and onboarding, but taking it through the entire organization, identifying the potential in your organization, as well as leadership potential and team insights, using this data to develop your employees, and then matching people to new opportunities like internal mobility and career pathing, succession planning, and workforce planning. And so I'm perfectly where I wanted to be on time, so I sorry I rushed through that last little bit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to show you a quick 2-minute video of how our customer, Scotiabank, is using this data to advance their diversity, equity, and inclusion. So when you stop looking at that historical data and start looking at the new data set, it has a profound impact on who you bring into your organization. So Miriam, I'm going to let you play the video.
As a student, your resume started with a template or you copying your BFF's layout. Hell, it might even been your career center that made it. But then it was all about wordsmithing, reviewing, grammar check, people looking it over, advice, constantly changing it. And for what? Congrats, you got a sheet of 8.5 by 11 that sums up what exactly? Exactly. We're not looking for some generic, over-processed, oversimplified, templated view of what you've done. We want to know what you're gonna do, the real you, who you are as a person. Because here at Scotiabank, we want, scratch that, we need you to bring your whole self to work every day, not 8.5 by 11 you. We hired the authentic you. That diversity of thinking, the different points of view, key strengths and passion, all of that allows us to solve complex problems for our clients and our people and develop the best products and technologies. Okay, don't get us wrong. All that you gain as a student through your extracurriculars, work experience, and volunteering is super valuable and has helped shape you into who you are. But doesn't that story warrant more than a 5-second review on a single sheet of paper? Plus, we've still got your LinkedIn. Starting now, in Canada, all of our intern, co-op, and graduate program positions no longer require student resumes. Cut the bias away and meet us online, in person, at events, or get noticed by applying with your Plum profile. Because at Scotiabank, we're here for every future.
So as promised, you can go in and complete your own Plum profile. And so hopefully you can see my screen again. And you can go to use.plum.io/TG to get your own talent guide, your own professional development guide, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. And then I think we're going to open it up now for the next 10 minutes for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Caitlin. I found that so insightful. I think the rest of the audience did as well. I think we're just waiting for some questions to come through, but just a comment, actually. I think your presentation as a whole was just fantastic. And I think oftentimes a lot of leaders, with HR leaders as well as operational leaders, we get caught up in a trap, and the trap sometimes is the Peter principle. So I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that, but sometimes what that means is just because someone's doing a really good job at the role that they currently have doesn't necessarily make them great at the next job. So when we're talking about succession planning, I think it was perfectly said, Caitlin, just having the science behind it to support it, having the development plans that are there as well to ensure that that high potential or that employee that you have can be set up for success and thrive as they move on into the next step in their career. And then it just ties in retention, which I think is obviously so important and top of mind for all of us within HR. So thank you so much for sharing. I thought that was amazing. So let's just open it up to some questions. If anyone wants to join the stage, ask some questions live. I don't see any hands up yet.
You can either type in the chat, or yes, if you're brave, we can bring you on camera and you can just ask the question live. Oh, now we're getting some Q&A.
There we go. Caitlin, this is solely needed. When do you think this approach will realistically be the norm? I have personally applied to jobs at HR tech vendors, and apparently even they don't. Sorry, I can't read this.
Need
their own advice. Oh, it just keeps moving. Sorry. Also, this would be a fantastic for job seekers.
Yeah, so we believe two things. The job seeker part, it's something where we promote our Plum profile right off of our website for free for job seekers to take. And we see people daily sharing their talents on LinkedIn and using the words in their cover letter and really using this kind of as a credential around those innate talents. And so we see that growing. And would love to have the bandwidth and resources over the next couple of years to really go after those job seekers to help support them. And I think that if job seekers start really promoting this, it does, and asking for it, it does start to create a shift. In terms of this being the norm, one of the things that we find is that companies don't realize that this is possible. Because industrial organizational psychology has been controlled by consultants for so long, they think that it can only be applied for a specific project or a specific siloed use case. They don't realize that this same data set, once you have it on your employee, you can repurpose it for all these different scenarios. And so for us, it's really about education at this point, getting the awareness out there that this is possible, and getting the awareness out that when we talk about transforming our workforce, it needs to start with understanding your people, like really understanding them. And that, making decisions without this data is like making decisions blind. And so I think the first part is getting people to realize that it's possible. And then it's really about showing how it's game changing for organizations like Scotiabank. That puts pressure on the other banks to go, Scotia has been able to raise the number of diverse candidates and employees dramatically faster than their peers. And so when that starts getting promoted, it puts some other pressure on the industry too. So it's about those customers promoting how they're at the cutting edge too.
Great, we have a couple more questions coming in. So Sarah Christie asks, she loves the presentation. They're a highly unionized environment, so about 80% of their 23,000 employees. How have you seen this work within a collective agreement environment?
It's an area that I think we're still learning, to be honest. SAP is a partner of ours and a customer as well. And there's been more barriers in Germany where there's more work councils and similar types of environments. And we haven't found the perfect answer yet, but I think it's a journey we need to explore together. I wish I had a silver bullet answer. We tend to find that if it is in a talent acquisition capacity where you are hiring people that aren't part of the union, there's no problem, and that tends to be an entry point. Once you get into union employees, one of the solutions we've seen is making it a voluntary. Like, this isn't going to be used. We're very clear this data is not used to screen people out. This data is to screen people in, like Maya, that you never would have considered for product management. And so often the time it becomes very voluntary versus kind of requested. Even in a voluntary capacity, we've seen upwards to 90% completion rate by employees. So there is an opportunity there. And then the peers say, wow, this was amazing. And that then spreads.
Okay, thank you. Sarah asked a question that she had just completed the Corn Ferry training last week and found it very educational, but it was based on someone's point of view. This tool can be used in conjunction with or instead of the program, Caitlin?
Yeah, I would be bold and say, we see, because this can just scale so much further, and because it can be used by individuals without having to go through a bunch of training, we see this as probably an evolution of what that was. So, anybody that's trying to use industrial organizational psychology, we're a fan of, because there just needs to be more of this data used. So it's, any kind of program, like tool you're using or system, like, we're pro using this data. But I would say that this is an evolution of where that is. My suggestion is that this does replace what's happening with Corn Ferry, that we've automated a lot of those things so that it is self-serve and scalable.
Great. Michael asked a really good question here. So knowing that people evolve and grow, how do you ensure employee data profiles remain current?
Yeah, so we really focus on what is consistent. It's not about how you feel today. It's about what really is consistent about how you prioritize your behaviors. And so what happens is that after the age of about 22, 23, industrial organizational psychology has shown that people's personality and cognitive behaviors are pretty stable at that point. And so the test, retest viability, like, you're not getting different results one day from the next, with the exception that a small portion of the population, if they've gone through a traumatic life event, or if they've gone through, weekly coaching, like executive coaching for over a year, you do start to potentially see some dramatic shifts. And so we do allow people to retake this once a year, but it's not necessary. And a way to think about it is, if somebody took their Plum profile 3 years ago, and now you have a brand new job that you've just entered into the system, and now that person's a 98 match, well, maybe if you ask them to retake the assessment, they'll be a 95 match. That's the type of difference you may see, 3 years later for the majority of people, but you still know that you should have a conversation. And that's the point, is how do we screen in more people? How do we get more people to have the right conversations?
For sure, that's great. Caitlin, you did touch on diversity and inclusion. So I had a quick question here. How does Plum's talent data help to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion outcomes?
Yeah, so the first part is that we're using a totally different data set to screen in people for those conversations. And so the first thing that our customers notice is they just start having the conversations with people they never would have had a conversation with before. That leader that's interviewing for product management now would have never talked to Maya. And so the statistics are pretty strong in terms of what Scotiabank's been able to do with us, for example. And I'm hoping I'm not going to misquote, but I believe that the number of people with color that they had hired went from 4% to 10% by implementing this instead of resumes. And then overall, visible minorities went to 60% when the rest of the banks are just committing to hiring 40%. And so we're seeing pretty substantial differences because the pipeline changes. Who you're shortlisting is changing. Okay,
great. So just to be respectful for time, we're just about to wrap up the session. So any other questions that anyone has, Caitlin's information is there on the screen for you to message her directly. Wanted just to mention as well that there is another session that follows at 10:50. So if you're available, please join for an interactive wellness activity with Dr. Jonas Aford. And we encourage everyone to visit the virtual trade show at any time during the event. This is a really great networking opportunity as well. So find a seat at the virtual tables. And there's a really great feature that does a random networking as well for everyone to explore. So thank you everyone once again for participating, and yeah, hope to talk to everyone throughout the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I've tried answering a couple of questions in the chat there, but thank you everybody for this. This was amazing, and looking forward to you reaching out and talking. Thanks.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.